Hi, my name is Megan Astle, and I am going to be presenting on Graston, the Graston Technique. So the history of Graston is really interesting. As many of you know, there are many instrument-assisted soft tissue mobilization techniques and brands out there. Graston is a very popular one that you'll see in many physical therapist offices or athletic trainers use. It was founded by David Graston in the 1990s. It is believed to be specifically in 1994 that it was commercialized. He actually figured out this technique, or I guess discovered and developed this technique after using some handmade tools and instruments that he made after a knee injury while skiing. The goal of Graston is to promote healing. The theory behind it is increasing blood flow to myofascial adhesions, and we'll get more into that later, talking about the evidence and things that way. But it does fall under the inhibit part of the corrective exercise continuum. When you read in the textbook, it talks about that being IA. STM is basically falls under that inhibit section. So what does it look like? These are your typical Graston tools. That have come out. They've been out for a while now, since, like I said, the 1990s. So we're going to step in and look at each of these tools individually, break them down. What do they do? How do you use them? So the GT1, Graston Technique 1 tool, is the one highlighted there, the biggest tool. It is used for larger muscles and or muscle groups, and the flat side always goes against the tissue. So if you look on the pictures, Graston Technique, their website, they have a bunch of videos on all of their specific tools, how to use them. And so these are screenshots from those, which you can find in the citations at the end of the presentation. But if you look here in the top right, you'll see the demonstrator, he's working away from his body. So he's holding them with his fingertips. A lot of people want to use their whole hand and really grab it with their fists, but we want to make sure we're using our fingertips. In addition to that, you can see in that left picture as well, the Graston ingrained is going to be facing you, facing away. That will let you know that the flat edge is the part that's going to be facing down on the client or patient. You're going to work away from your body, and then if you were to switch directions, so if you look in this top right picture, you'll see the demonstrator would be pushing toward the athlete's hip. If they were working more on that quadricep area, if they were working more toward the knee, they would need to switch the direction of the instrument of the GT1 so that they're using the proper direction, angle, and flat side. In addition, we want to make sure we're doing this at a 30 to 60 degree angle. We want to make sure it stays at that appropriate angle to provide the best, I guess, feedback and technique. Moving into the GT2, this is the smaller convex area tool. There's a lot of smaller tools that can be used for those convex areas, but this is going to have a single beveled edge and also a double beveled edge as well, two different sides there depending on which part you use. There are also those two convex knobs and angles for smaller specific areas. So there's a couple different ways that you want to hold this tool. You can use the two-hand hold or you can use the single hand hold. I personally think if I was Graston certified, I would want to use the single hand hold. The index finger is really crucial for providing that stability and then also to palpate through the instrument. I think that's a huge thing with Graston tools is being able to kind of feel what you're doing. Sometimes it's nice with our hands, we're able to feel what the person's body actually feels like from that immediate touching. However, with tools, we may not realize how hard we're pushing or what's actually going on in the person's body. You may not be able to feel that tissue as directly. And so if we're looking for specific knots and things like that, having that index finger at the tip there can help us to palpate better and understand, give us a little bit more feedback. The GT3 is for smaller specific lesions, as they explain in one of their videos. I'm going to go into this a little bit more later, but there's a number of different strokes and methods as far as Graston goes. They have the brushing, strumming, J-strokes are specifically for the GT3. So there are many handholds and grips that you can use. You have the classic pencil grip, we have the duckbill grip, the extension of the index finger, and then in the bottom right corner, this is something I would warn against, is the dagger grip. If you see someone doing this, it is called a dagger grip for a reason. You should run. It is not great because you are probably going to be applying too much pressure, a little bit too aggressive, just as it looks aggressive. You wouldn't eat like this, so you probably shouldn't use Graston like this. You obviously are not going to be able to palpate through the instrument very well, and so it's just not the move either way. The GT4, this is the most popular used instrument. It is a single beveled convex treatment edge, and it's more specific on the convex tissues like the quadriceps, but it's also great for concave areas like the palm of the hand. So very versatile tool, super awesome. I have never personally used Graston. I'm not certified or a specialist in any of those ways, but I've definitely had Graston used on me more than a few times, and I would say this instrument is awesome and probably the one that is used most on me as well. So, despite where it is on the body. Obviously, you see on the right, we have multiple handholds as well. We have the two handholds as well as a single handhold. Again, remember the single handhold, we want to use that index finger to help stabilize and to palpate. Moving on to GT5, this is a single beveled concave treatment edge. It was originally made for the intercostals, but it's actually really good for moderately convex tissues as well. So also versatile, even though it was originally a little bit more specialized. It is just like the GT1, so it's all the similar handholds, everything that way, and purpose, as well as the strokes that you would be using it for, except it doesn't have any handles. So that's the difference. It kind of looks a little bit similar to that GT4 as well. Make sure it's really important to expose the entire treatment edge. I'll show you a little bit later. Sometimes individuals will want to grab the entire instrument and it can cover up some of that edge with their fingers. We want to make sure that we're exposing that entire treatment edge. Finally, we have the GT6. We're right there to the end. This is designed for the digits of the hand or foot, but it can be used for any small specific lesions. It has a single beveled concave edge on the left side, a double beveled concave edge on the middle, and a small hook, small convex treatment tip as well. So there's a lot of different things. It's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. It's also the only time when the flat edge is going to be ingrained and the beveled side is blank. So usually the ingrained side that has the name of the tool, Graston, and all of that is going to be the beveled side, and the flat side goes on the tissue, but in this one it's the opposite. It's also more easily held with one hand. So while you can hold it with two hands, it's recommended with one hand and tends to be the more preferred way. So here are few different ways you can hold it. Obviously, in the first two, we have that index finger there for stability and to palpate, and then we also have the pencil grip as well, depending on which part of the tool you want to use, because there are so many different ways you can use this one. So breaking it down, we have some common techniques or strokes, as the Graston Technique LLC would call it. So we have the different treatment strokes. We have sweeping, fanning, scooping, swiveling, brushing, strumming, J strokes. There's a whole bunch of them. And in this table that I've made, we can see which instruments work best for which techniques and which strokes. So the GT1 is going to be for the sweeping, fanning, scooping, swiveling. The same as well for the GT2. The GT3 is, I'd say, more different than the rest in that it focuses on brushing, strumming, and J strokes. The GT4 just sweeping and fanning. GT5 the first four as well as GT1 and GT2. And the GT6 is, like I said, your Swiss Army knife, does pretty much all of them, or is recommended for pretty much all of them other than the fanning and swiveling. So just so you are aware, the treatment order that generally is advised, you're going to first start kind of by scanning, feeling out what are going to be the areas of tension, where you're going to be finding those myofascial adhesions. Then you're going to move into your treatment, and you're going to finish it off occasionally with some light sweeping or feathering, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well. I want to pop over to some videos to look at some of these techniques. We'll start with swiveling. I found a gal on, she posts a lot of her videos on Instagram, and she is a physical therapist, and she goes into a lot of these different techniques, and I found it very helpful. So we'll watch a couple of her videos. We'll first start with swiveling.
When we swivel, we're doing it for one of two reasons. First option, let's think about a myofascial trigger point that may be in gastroc or soleus. We could locate that trigger point, use the knob of GT1, add pressure, and then our swivel could look like a motorcycle or more like a ratchet. Okay, so we're looking.
So there we have our swivel technique. Like she said, the motorcycle or the ratchet, a good way to explain it. We'll move on to this one. She talks a little bit about tendons and things that way as well, but I found this one very helpful as well.
Unilateral cross friction. I've divided up the suprapatellar tendon. I've done it into threes. because I want us to think about specificity and treatment. I've got GT3, there's my angle.
There you go,
And
using
I'm going to
GT3.
strum.
And this is where we're going to learn how to strum properly.
Strum, strum, strum. I'm going to go 30 seconds this way. And then I'm going to flip the instrument. Strum.
Make sure to flip that instrument
strum,
because it's a common error
strum.
to want to use the wrong side of the
Coming
tool.
across the tendon. The goal is cellular reorganization. The other way. Okay?
So that's a great example of strumming, and we'll move on to the final one right here, the J stroke.
Give me a little more turn. There it is.
So we can kind of see those J's or almost R shapes as explained in the video on that person's leg. That's the kind of J stroke that we're looking for with the J stroke technique. So those are a couple of the many techniques that can be used. There are many common errors, I would say, when it comes to Graston. We have too much pressure and scraping for too long, I think, are very common. Growing up, I always was bothered when I felt like athletic trainers or physical therapists weren't pushing hard enough. I felt like they weren't going to be making a difference. But the evidence and the research would disagree. Sometimes the lighter can actually be more effective. And so if you look in the picture in the top right, clearly this guy got wrecked. And it was actually a Facebook post, and he said, pretty much never do Graston again. This is way awful. It hurts so bad. And I think that kind of goes to show that we need to be really careful. We need to make sure when we're getting these certifications and those who are certified that they know what they're doing, right? Do not just go and do Graston or, some other tool and not know what you're doing. You can really damage and hurt people. And I don't know if this guy is going to be getting the benefits that many people would hopefully be getting from Graston if it would have been done in a better way. So people also use incorrect grips. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. In the bottom left, you can see that when they're grabbing all the way around, they're not allowing that full edge to be used, and so that's incorrect. We also have that dagger grip that I was talking about. And then in the bottom right corner, you can see they mentioned that GT1 needs to be held with the fingertips. And in this example, he's kind of grabbing all the way around. So if we refer back to that first picture, we can see fingertips is the better way to go. So those are some common errors that you can run into. Non-traditional methods are, there's a few different things that people will do. Sometimes they will move the joint as they go, so kind of like an active range of motion. And they'll use Graston while they pinpoint specific knots and things like that. They'll also use stroking peripheral nerve pathways, which is an interesting one that I actually hadn't heard of before. Also stroking lymph nodes to promote drainage and decrease inflammation post-surgery. I thought that was also quite interesting. I'd mostly just had it Graston performed on me for tight muscles and things like that. So I thought it was interesting that it was for all those other reasons as well. And then there are some specific positioning of clients. I was going to watch a video, but I don't know if we have tons of time for that today, so I won't go into that. But using specifically positioning the client to put them in put a muscle, I guess, more to the surface or in a certain location. Maybe we'll click on it and see if we can get it to load here. All right, here we go.
Over this leg. Drop your hip this way and back. And now we have tension
Putting them
here.
in a specific position here to target specific muscles, which I thought was really interesting. I hadn't seen this before.
Both directions. So go ahead and bring the hip out and then come down. Good. So now we've created tension. And we can
so like I said, just putting them in
GT3.
specific positions to isolate different areas. All right, so recommended prescription. How do we do this? So it's recommended 2 times per week, and they want to have 2 to 3 days rest in between. Not necessarily physical activity rest, but just rest from the Graston itself. When they do this, it was also mentioned earlier in that video, Graston recommends that you do 30 to 60 seconds per lesion, 3 to 5 minutes per muscle group. Sometimes that can be longer if it's a larger muscle like the TFL or maybe quadriceps. You want to do 8 to 10 minutes total though. We don't want to, do too much on somebody. Now it comes into us while we're working on preparing to take the CES exam. how does this fit within what we're learning about and within our scope? Because obviously, Graston is a very specific, it's a specialization, it's a certification, and only specific people can get it. So, how does it apply to us? How can we use it to help us? So, obviously, we would refer somebody out to a licensed professional who is Graston certified. They would receive that IASTM treatment before coming in to work with us. If we can time it well and have them come immediately after, or maybe it's a neighboring, we work in the same office or something like that, that would be awesome. They would meet with the CES shortly after, and hopefully we can benefit from some of the evidence that shows it could increase flexibility and mobility, which could be awesome and it could really help the training session. So that is something to really look forward to and see if that, person to person, if that's something that they would benefit from. I would say if they're not going over in the Graston session and the ISTM session, if they're not going over all of the overactive muscles that have been found during the mobility and movement assessments and various assessments, then maybe we do want to do some foam rolling and things like that before heading into the lengthening, activating, and integrating part of the training session. Obviously, as mentioned before, Graston fits under the inhibiting section of the corrective exercise continuum. And we just want to make sure we're kind of bringing everything together like it was mentioned in previous modules. We don't want to only do inhibition and lengthening. We want to get all of them. So first inhibiting with the IASTM and then implementing the lengthening, activating, and integrating parts the rest of the day. Obviously, this is 2 times per week. In the textbook, it talks about how self-myofascial rolling, like foam rolling, is recommended 2 to 5 times. So if the client is feeling good and they're feeling great, maybe they do want to foam roll a couple more times during the week. They can also, like I mentioned earlier, isolate into different muscle groups if those haven't been hit with Graston. We don't necessarily want someone to get Graston and then immediately go foam roll that same area. They've already kind of elicited that inflammatory response, and so we may not want to be adding on top of that that may not be beneficial. So there has been a decent amount of primary research. I will say there have been relatively mixed results, and a lot of the research has been shown in smaller sample sizes and in the short term. So it would be really beneficial to have research done in the long term to see if this really is leading to positive effects long term, as well as greater sample sizes to really see if it's beneficial for the general population. In the primary research, though, we have found that interventions using Graston have led to removing scar tissue, localizing inflammatory responses initiation. So basically, this is just talking about promoting healing and starting that inflammatory response to allow that inflammatory cascade to occur so we can promote healing long term. Without, I guess, initiating that inflammatory response, we won't lead to the healing. And so if we can localize that with Graston and promote healing in specific areas that need it, hopefully we can lead to greater healing long term, flush out some of that scar tissue. It's also been shown to improve short-term flexibility and mobility. So this is another case where in this research study, looking at more long-term maybe would be helpful to kind of get an idea, is this leading to benefits long-term or just short-term? That being said, though, short-term could be a good thing, like we said, for our own treatments and our own exercise prescriptions. Helping improve that flexibility and mobility can lead to greater, I guess, mobility during the exercises, during the entire corrective exercise program that day. So that could be beneficial. Finally, there has also been some research on feathering. Feathering is that finishing part that I mentioned earlier in the, I guess, the order of how treatment goes: scanning, then treatment, then finishing/feathering at the end. They have found that performing 90 seconds of just light feathering per lesion has been shown to help with delayed onset muscle soreness, 24 to 48 hours. Sorry, that's a typo. That's 24, not 42 hours post-competition. So how would I sell this? I think looking at the evidence is a pretty good way to sell everything. So I would say, hey, obviously I probably wouldn't go into all the detail of every single one of these little tiny things. But I would, dumb it down a little bit and say, hey, we're going to help try and restart the healing process in those specific areas. Maybe if they're having pain or tightness, or maybe they're having a bunch of knots there, I could say, buy into this. Like, this has been shown to, like I said, remove some scar tissue, initiate that inflammatory response. So it's going to help you heal, like recover in that area. You're going to be feeling, you're going to move right? It could maybe lead to increased flexibility and mobility. So It's going to help you move better and you're going to feel better hopefully long term. I guess I wouldn't want to say long term because the evidence may not suggest that, but it's going to help you move right and feel good. I think everybody wants to move right and feel good, especially if you're going to be working with older individuals, which I think is very common with strength and conditioning coaches, those who are corrective exercise specialists. And so helping them say, hey, you're going to feel healthier and move right, feel good. It's going to help break stuff up, right? Break up that scar tissue that may be limiting some of that range of motion. So I think kind of going through that, helping them see why is it going to specifically help them in their situation. Maybe we'll have individuals who have, say, plantar fasciitis or different injuries like that. Obviously, we're not going to be working with them if they don't have medical clearance and they haven't been cleared for exercise. But working with, say, a physical therapist to do some of that Graston work, improving that, and then coming and working with us, there has been research that's supported, and a lot of the research supports Graston paired with corrective exercise, not just Graston alone, but when we implement that with the corrective exercise, we see greater results. So why not, Why not get started with this, implement some corrective exercise, and see benefits long term? So, how do we do it? How do we get certified? The sad news is, unless you're a licensed medical professional, you cannot really be certified for Graston. That's not to say there aren't different certifications for other IASTM things. I'm not going to mention that here because I'm focusing on Graston, but that's something to look into for sure if there's other types of certifications there. But for Graston specifically, there is a Graston Technique Specialist certification through Graston company, Graston Technique themselves. So they allow those who are actively involved in musculoskeletal therapy. So physical therapists, athletic trainers, chiropractors, occupational therapists, and their assistants, things like that, they may certify. And there's a few different ways to go about this training. For Graston specifically, they offer an essential training, which is $650. It's 12 plus hours of work. They offer it hybrid, in person, kind of self-paced. So 12 hours, but also how long it takes you to get through it. And it's kind of the basics of ISTM. So they kind of go through all of that. Advanced training is $695. This is 14 to 15 hours, and they're going to go through more of the complex techniques and clinical applications of how to use this. And then, obviously, when you buy it through Graston, that's going to pay for your initial credential exam that would happen in the end, that would certify you. However, every 2 years you do have to renew, and that's $99, and you do also have to take a renewal quiz. So, it's something that just keep on paying, just like any certification, I would say. Luckily, there are no CEUs required, which is nice. So no, you're not going to have to continue education for it other than just taking that renewal quiz. They expect you to be using it actively and staying, up to date if there's any new information that comes out. However, it's pretty straightforward and honestly pretty seamless. To pay $650 and have a certification in 12 hours after taking the test, that's not too shabby if you ask me. So these are my citations. I hope you all enjoyed this presentation and learned a little bit about Graston. Thanks so much.